The most popular recipe on the Sweet Spot has been the butter pecan cake without question. So what I decided to do is for all my cheesecake lovers out there, I'm going to bring a butter pecan cheesecake recipe to all of you. Oh, it's gonna be just as good as the butter pecan cake, except it's gonna be creamy and rich just like all of my cheesecake recipes. Coming here next on the Sweet Spot. The first and one of the most important steps to this cheesecake is to first toast your pecans. It really brings out that pecan flavor and it's gonna give that butter pecan richness throughout the cheesecake. So I'm gonna add to a bowl my melted butter, my brown sugar, and my secret ingredient is a little bit of honey. Honey adds that sweetness without overpowering the nuttiness of the pecan. So we're gonna get all of that honey inside of the bowl. And then using my whisk, I'm gonna whisk all of that together. All right, so my brown sugar has completely dissolved into the butter and honey mixture. Just gonna take my whisk over here and put it aside. Try not to make a mess. And then I'm gonna add all of those pecans into that brown butter or that butter honey mixture. So add all of the pecans and just using a spatula, I'm gonna toss them in this mixture to make sure they're all coated. Now, as you can see, this cheesecake has a lot of ingredients and different moving parts. So that's why I'm taking my time to show you each step. So let's complete our first step, which is our toasted pecans. And you just want to take a baking sheet with parchment paper and just pour your pecans over that, well, on top of that parchment, and just kind of spread them around as evenly as you can. And then we're gonna pop these into the oven. You're gonna kind of toast these for 5 to 7 minutes. When you start to smell that strong aroma, I usually set my timer for 5 because I can start to smell them. You don't want to scorch them, because if you roast them too long, you can scorch them and then you'll get that little bit of a burn flavor. So really watch them. You want the aroma to be strong. You want them to become a brighter golden brown. If you start to see a little char or blackening, they're in there too long. And it's going to be in a 350 degree oven. So 5 to 7 minutes at 350 degrees. Really watch them, set it for 5. If you need a little longer, take a little longer. So I'm gonna pop these in and then we're gonna start on our crust. My pecans are toasted, they smell amazing. Maybe one day someone will invent a way to smell through video, because you have, like when you make this, your kitchen is just gonna smell with this beautiful aroma of toasted pecans, I promise you. So now let's move on to our second step. The second step is making our crust for the cheesecake, because we have to pre-bake this also. So what I'm going to do now is I have my food processor out and I'm going to add my graham crackers to my food processor. This takes a lot of graham crackers, so I kind of break them up so that they can all fit into my food processor, and just get them all in there. So I'm gonna put my top on, and then we're gonna pulse these. Like I say, don't hit it on low or high because you can, really grind them too much. I'm gonna just pulse until I get a nice crumb. So I have a nice crumb with my graham crackers. It's time to add my pecans. And these aren't toasted. You can use these straight out the pack, because once again, we're gonna pre-bake this crust, so it's gonna bring out that flavor and aroma. And with that, I'm gonna add my sugar. So pecans and sugar. And then put my top back on, and I'm gonna pulse until I see my pecans get smaller bits. I don't want big chunks, but I do want them to stay a little whole. All right, so I have my pecan pieces all in there. My final step is to add the butter, and we're just gonna pulse once again until that butter's combined. So I'm gonna add all of that melted butter in there, and then put my top back on and pulse until I see the crumbs start to come together and form a little bit of a crust batter. My crust base is all done. I transferred mine into a bowl just because it makes it easier for me to work with. You can pour it directly from your food processor. The first step I want to do before I add that to my springform pan is I want to take a piece of parchment paper and kind of just snap it into the pan, just like this. Because what that is going to do, once my cheesecake bakes, it's going to allow me to get it out of the pan fairly easy. It normally doesn't stick to the sides, but the bottom is where you can get your crust sticking, and when you try to pull it out, you lose part of your crust stuck to the bottom of the pan. So now that that's done, let's pour all of our crust filling into that pan. We're going to put that aside. Using the back of a glass or a measuring cup, you want to press down the crust into the pan to the bottom and the side. So I'm just going to just kind of move it around and smooth it myself, and kind of just take the back of it and make sure I get it evenly distributed across the bottom, and then just start pressing it in to really make sure I get a nice firm crust in the bottom of that pan, and just working the measuring cup or the glass around the sides and bottom of your pan. And just using that cup, just continue to work your way around. I work from one side and work my way around so that I can keep pressing it evenly into the pan, and just work it and smooth it out and press it in. My crust is all ready to go. You will bake this in a 350-degree oven for about 7 to 8 minutes. You don't want to over bake your crust. Really check on your crust because you're baking it at a higher temperature. I usually set my timer once again for about 5 minutes just to make sure, because I know my oven can bake sometimes faster. So just really watch this, but no more than 8 minutes max, but it's going to be closer to the 5 to 7 minute range. So really just watch your crust. You really just want it to come together, brown, and have a little bit of aroma. Before we get into making our cream cheese filling, there's one essential ingredient we have to prep, and that's our brown butter. So we're going to go over to the stove and start making our brown butter. First, we're going to add our butter to our saucepan over medium heat. You want a saucepan with a lighter bottom because you really want to see your butter brown. If you've ever kind of sauteed a steak or any meat, chicken, anything in butter, and you notice once that pan heats up, your butter starts to turn this nice golden brown and has this aroma, that's the stage you want to get to. So add your butter, let it melt down. I like to keep stirring mine and help it heat evenly until it becomes a nice golden brown. Once we reach that golden brown, we're going to remove it from the stove. I'm telling you, when you make this recipe, your kitchen is going to smell amazing. I'm smelling the graham cracker crust that I just took out of the oven, my toasted pecans that I transferred to a bowl. So we're now ready to make our filling for our cheesecake. So the first thing we're gonna add to our bowl is the magic ingredient, of course, all of that cream cheese. Just get that into a bowl. I like to pre-whip my cream cheese, so I'm gonna pre-whip this cream cheese and then start adding the remaining ingredients. So I whipped my cream cheese to smooth it out. I'm now going to add my sour cream to the mixture. And then blend that together just to get those two combined. And then we're gonna start adding in our sugars. Once you add the sour cream, you notice that you start to get that smoother, creamier batter. So now what we're going to do is we're gonna add in our sugar. So I have my brown sugar. Add that in. Brown sugar loves to stick together. Break it up a little bit. My granulated sugar. And we're gonna add a little bit of my flour. Well, add the flour, not a little bit, all of the flour. And get that to blend together. Next, we're gonna add in our eggs. And blend this until they're combined. After the eggs, we're gonna add our very special ingredient, which is our brown butter. And you can see here, it's a nice golden brown. We've already heated that on the stove. I've let it come down to room temperature. So we're gonna add the brown butter in, along with our vanilla. And then we're gonna blend this until combined and then add the magic butter pecans. My last and final ingredient to add are those toasted butter pecans we did earlier. I broke them up with my fingers because they do tend to stick together. So when I took them off the pan, I kind of broke them up. I did taste one. The butter pecan flavor is just wait until you taste it. So I'm gonna pour a little bit in, kind of fold those to make sure I get even distribution and they're not really sticking together. So I fold in about half of them at a time. So I got those folded in and I'm gonna pour in the rest. I cannot wait to taste this. It smells amazing. It already looks amazing just looking at the batter with all of those butter pecans. So good. So I'm gonna finish folding these in and then we're gonna prep our spring form pan, get it filled, ready to pop it right into the oven. So before we put our filling into our spring form pan, we need to prep it because we're gonna bake this in a water bath. So I like to take 2 sheets of aluminum foil and do kind of a crisscross pattern with them. So one going horizontal, one going vertical. And then I put my pan in the middle. And what you wanna do is you wanna gently bring the foil up around the sides to create a water barrier so that you don't get water soaking into your cheesecake as it bakes in the water bath. All right, so, and I just fold it over. Once again, kind of making sure that the foil comes at least halfway up the pan and creates a watertight barrier. And then I fold at the seams, and I know the foil's making some noise, so hopefully you can still hear me. I fold at the seams so that I can really press it in to the sides and create a strong seal. All right, once I got it loosely all folded, then I just take the pressure of my hand and mold it as close and as firm as possible to the pan all the way around, really making sure I have a nice little water barrier. All right, and then once you get it in there, I just take my spatula and just smooth it around until my cheesecake is nice and even across the top. I finished the water sealing with my foil. It's now time to add my filling into the crust. So I'm gonna take my bowl here and just pour that luscious, creamy pecan cheesecake filling right into my pan. So you're gonna set your oven for 300 degrees and you're gonna bake your cheesecake in a water bath. So I have a huge baking pan here. So the first thing I'm going to do is put my cheesecake right in the middle. It's all nice and spread out. I use boiling water and a tea kettle works fine because it doesn't splash everywhere. So I'm just lightly pouring from the tea kettle and I'm gonna fill this pan up halfway. So I'm just watching as I pour and I wanna get it halfway up the sides of the cheesecake. And next we're gonna gently move this to the oven. Once again, in a 300 degree oven, we're gonna bake this for about 70 minutes. So I set my timer for 60 because you'll start to see the cheesecake puff up, break away from the sides, but really about 70 minutes. You wanna make sure it's firm. It may still move a little bit in the pan, but you don't wanna jiggle in the middle. You wanna make sure that it's a little firm. So if it moves from side to side, you see the cake moving versus like a jiggle or a wiggle or a ripple in the middle of the cake. So we're gonna put this in the oven. My cheesecake is completely done. I just want to tell you what I did. I removed it from the oven and removed it from the water bath. You want to let this cheesecake cool on a cooling rack for about an hour because you really want to let it set up a little bit at room temperature. You'll see it slowly shrink a little bit, so it'll kind of shrink from the sides of the spring form pan. You just remove the sides of the spring pan, and then this cheesecake is going to go in the refrigerator for at least 6 hours or overnight. I recommend overnight, but at least 6 hours to overnight. So I'm gonna pop this in the refrigerator and come back tomorrow and finish up. My cheesecake has fully set. I let it rest in the refrigerator for 24 hours. So I'm gonna do my last step, which is making my butter whipped topping. A brown butter whipped topping, that is. So just to tell you what I have here, I have my heavy cream, I have 4 ounces of cream cheese, little confectioner's sugar, and I also made more brown butter. So to make this brown butter, follow the same steps you saw earlier in the video. And I put aside some of the butter toasted pecans. You can do that, like add about 1/4 cup extra that you're making earlier, and you can set them aside. These are gonna be a little bit of garnish. That's optional. So what I wanna do first is you're almost gonna start as if you're making a buttercream or cream cheese frosting. So I'm gonna start with my cream cheese, add that to my mixer here, and then I'm gonna add the brown butter. And the reason why I wanna add the brown butter to the cream cheese is because if I put this brown butter into cold, heavy cream, oh my God, it's gonna seize up and it'll have chunks of curdled butter running throughout my whipped cream. Also, another tip that I do is I put my bowl, my mixer bowl, in the freezer for as long as possible. So when I got up this morning, I threw it in the freezer. It's about midday, so it's nice and cold. So what I'm gonna do first is whip or cream this cream cheese out along with that brown butter. All right, so my brown butter is incorporated into the cream cheese. You can see it's still nice and smooth. I don't have any chunks. Now I'm gonna add the heavy whipping cream to this mixture. And we're going to start to whip that up, and then I'm going to also add that confectioner's sugar. This is going to give it a little stiffness, and we're going to whip this until we get stiff peaks. Now you're going to whip this on high. I take it to the highest that my mixer can go, or just one down if it's whipping too fast. But watch it, you don't want to over whip, you want to whip just until you get nice stiff peaks, nice and creamy. All right, so I've finished whipping all of my ingredients. You can see it gives me a nice stiff whipped cream. You can actually take a spoon and put a dollop on top of a slice. I like to pipe my whipped topping on top of my cheesecake because we're gonna top with these toasted pecans. So I'm gonna transfer this to a piping bag, and then we're gonna pipe on top of our cheesecake. So I have my whipped topping in my piping bag, and what I'm gonna do is you can pipe anywhere you want, any decoration. I'm just gonna pipe big dollops or big rosettes or swirls, however you wanna call them, around the cheesecake so we can just douse it in all of these freshly made toasted pecans. So just creating a swirl, just getting a nice dollop of whipped cream, and I'm gonna go all the way around so that any piece I cut gets a heaping of that brown butter whipped cream, which I tasted it. It tastes amazing. It's not an overly sweet whipped cream. So if you're looking for a very sweet whipped cream, this is not gonna be the one. It gives you that flavor and that smoothness of a brown butter, just to add a little bit more to the brown or to the butter pecan flavor of the cheesecake. So just kind of going around and creating those rosettes all the way around the cheesecake so that we can garnish with those beautiful toasted pecans. Now that So we've added all of our whipped topping. Now just take those toasted pecans and just drop them all over that beautiful wreath or circle, however you want to call it, that you created with the whipped topping. And you can be generous with the pecans because once again, they have that butter pecan flavor that is going to really set this cheesecake off. My cheesecake is all plated. Look how beautiful that looks. It's garnished with those toasted pecans and that brown butter whipped cream. So let's cut a slice because I cannot wait to taste it. So I have cut myself a piece of that butter pecan cheesecake. It looks so delicious. Can't wait to taste this cheesecake. And like I said, if you've seen my butter pecan cake recipe, you have to try it as a cream cheese recipe. Look at this. Cannot wait. Oh my God, that is so good. Thank you so much for letting me share another recipe with all of you. Come back and see me. Hit like, subscribe right here on The Sweet Spot.